Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this morning's live session. Thanks so much for everybody who sent in suggestions for what we should cover. And we got an awful lot of questions asking about garden design, patio design, what to plant in the garden. So today I'm going to be chatting with garden designer Leonie Cornelius. So it's a topic that I love myself. When I was planning my own house, it was something that I really thought about an awful lot, how to connect with the garden, the view to the garden, especially with an open plan space. And, that's something that really is so important. I think that, when I first started out, it was amazing that the amount of people who were really focused on the house but didn't really think about the garden. And actually, when you're designing a house, you have your beautiful extension, but your garden is what you're looking out onto. So it's really important to hold back a little bit of budget just to be able to tackle that space. And, the lovely thing about gardens is it's something that you can do over time. So it's such a worthwhile investment and so worthwhile getting the right kind of advice. So I've popped in our bio, you'll find a little ebook which is all about open plan design. So if that's something that you're thinking about doing, we've loads of tips in there about how to connect with the garden, thinking about your orientation, where to place furniture, all that kind of thing. So that's in the bio. And then there's also in our resources section in our website, you'll find loads of videos. So there's one actually about my house, about what I did, the lessons I learned when I was designing this open plan space. So you can go and have a look at that. So loads and loads of information there. And as I say, the link is in the bio, so take a look at that afterwards. And please do keep coming with your suggestions. You can pop them in the chat now if you wish, but just for topics that you'd like us to cover, because it's so important to us that we're actually delivering stuff that's helpful for you, particularly at this time when everybody is spending so much time at home. So it'll just be a wonderful way for us to make sure that we're delivering the kind of content that you guys really want. So I'm going to invite Leonie now to join me. Just get this to work. Okay. Brilliant. And do remember as well that you can send us questions throughout the week. Hi, Leonie.
Hi, morning. Denise. How are you? Good morning.
Lovely to see you.
You too. Your garden looks gorgeous in the back there. I'm just admiring it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I was hoping to sit in the garden, but it's just so windy. It's incredibly windy here at the moment. So I don't know, is it the same with you?
On the West Coast. Yeah, really? Absolutely mental.
Yeah. No, so I'm looking at all my lovely trees and things and going, oh my God, some of them...
I know, yesterday there was leaves blown off my lime tree. Like literally half of them were gone. It was so windy.
Wow. Yeah. No, it's incredible weather at the moment. Incredible. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much. I mean, this is a topic that I absolutely love. I mean, I love spending time in the garden. Not my field of expertise, but really is an area that I just enjoy so much. And I think, I briefly touched on it in the intro. When we're designing homes for people, it's one of the most transformative things that we can do is to connect the house with the garden. Like, it's amazing how many homes you go into. I suppose if you think of the houses, say, even like the kind of houses that I would have grown up in from the 80s, it wasn't something that people did to connect with the garden. It was a very practical thing to have a door out onto the garden. It was for, hanging out the washing or bringing out the bins or whatever that might be. But just the impact it can have, that connection and transition between the two, it's really incredible. It can transform everything for people.
It's a really strong feature of a home build, I think, and now more than ever, I think with the connections between inside and outside becoming so much stronger and so much more important. Absolutely. It's so vital to have that connection. And you're right. I would have grown up in, cottage, small windows, the connection is not as you want it. So now with the really big openings and stuff, you're living in your garden almost. There's glass in between, and we have those possibilities now. So that connection to how they make us feel is so important as well, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's amazing, and I've written a lot about this. Just the health benefits and even the ability of nature just to de-stress you. There's a huge amount of studies done where even a visual connection with nature can, reduce blood pressure and help you think more clearly. So it's such a powerful thing.
and something that we can so easily do. We're so lucky in Ireland, most of us have so much space, so it's a really
Absolutely.
easy thing for us to do.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean, gardens have so much more than just I mean, there's the physical, like, getting out there, doing the digging, which is, you don't underestimate that, obviously, but the psychological angle, and then also
yeah,
touching the soil, which is really good for you. So you've got all those, benefits that a couple of, even half an hour, 5 minutes in the garden does you so much good. I know personally for me in the past while, being stuck at home and homeschooling and all of the rest of that, you go out and you're in a different space. You
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
a
yeah,
different person. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
incredible. And I've been really watching that over the past while, going, wow, this is like my heart rate is slowing down. I feel like
Yes,
a different
yeah, yeah,
person. So it's
yeah, yeah,
incredible.
yeah. No, it's wonderful. And even the bird song, I don't know, it's
Yeah,
everybody is commenting on it at the moment. It's just
absolutely.
incredible. Yeah. It's so wonderful. So we're really lucky. But I guess, even some of the questions that are coming in just there about different sizes of garden and
Mm,
where to tackle it. And I suppose one of the things, when we're designing homes for people, we're very conscious that, look, one of the major problems is people tend to try and focus on immediate problems. And we're trying to
mm,
encourage them, well, look into the future, okay,
yeah.
kids might be tiny now, but they won't always be tiny. So try and plan. Is it the
Mm,
same with gardens? Should you plan to allow it to evolve, to allow it to go through the different phases of life as kids grow
absolutely.
and stuff?
Absolutely. Your garden should grow with you.
Hmm.
So I think the biggest thing is allowing for multifunctional spaces.
Okay.
Having a look at how gardens can evolve over time. So, a well thought out layout, which you can have, for example, an area where there's a football area or a trampoline,
Mm.
but they become something then as you go on that become, say, a patio area, or a football area might become a new subdivided area that could be little garden rooms, but just making the right decisions early on and making that
Hmm.
plan and carefully
Mm.
considering it. And I think that's something I come back to again and again in my writing, in whatever I do, is getting that plan right, but allowing for that little bit of change and shift over time, because gardens aren't static. They're growing anyway, and
Sure.
you're living with them and they're living with you. So
Hmm.
they'll evolve and change and force you to, make changes over time, because that's how nature is. So
Hmm.
absolutely is plan, but leave that, usability factor that can change over time. And then
Mm.
I'd also say one thing that is important for going, changing things over time is the quality of materials. So if you choose
Sure.
amazing quality, or as good as you can afford for smaller areas, then you can allow the garden to grow around that, rather than
Hmm.
tearing it all up and starting again. So choosing one
Mm.
good solid thing that you fall in love with and allowing the rest to kind of organically grow and change over time.
Fabulous. And it's so interesting actually that you say that. I was chatting with one of the guys on our team actually, and she was saying that she's living in her family home and her parents really invested in the garden
Mm,
years and years ago, and it's still fantastic, and there's
yeah.
very little she needs to do to it and how easy it is to maintain it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you still have to look after it, but just making that investment and getting,
Yeah.
as you were saying, like the right things, the right products,
Yeah.
the right kind of planting, it makes
Yeah.
all the difference. It really makes
Absolutely.
all
It
the
makes it
difference for people.
last.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes it last. And you'll still appreciate it, 10, 20 years down the line. You look at it and go, well, look, it cleans up nicely, it works nicely, and you won't get sick of it. So it is worth, investing, and maybe going for a smaller area and teaming it with something else, or,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but falling in love with that one thing is a great thing to do.
Brilliant. Okay, great. And then something we hear a lot is people who would like a low maintenance garden. I don't like
Mm,
gardening. Now, I think a lot of people have changed.
mm,
We're even noticing as we're walking around here, people's gardens are just immaculate. I think I was saying that to you, and it's so lovely to see people out there pottering, even sitting in their front gardens, reading the paper,
yeah.
things like that. So it's really lovely. I think people are getting out and enjoying these spaces, and it's something that we've all been able to indulge in, one of the few indulgences over the last while. So it's been great.
Absolutely.
But the
I
low
think.
maintenance thing, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the low maintenance, I mean, there's never low maintenance in the garden because things are
Hmm.
growing. So a
Sure.
lot of people
Yeah.
ask me that too, is what do you go for low maintenance? And the first thing that comes to mind is sort of, evergreen clipped shrubs and perfectly maintained. And I'm not personally not a fan of that. If,
Hmm.
if there's definitely room for it, but
Yeah.
teamed with a little bit of wilderness. So I think low maintenance gardens don't have to be boring. You can have or disconnected from nature. You can have low maintenance gardens that do evolve with nature and that are good for, you know, bees and biodiversity. So I think the first thing you do is choose the right plants. So one of the big things that people do wrong is choosing plants, plopping them in, you know, planting them all over the place. And then, of course, they're going to be huge maintenance because they're all self-seeding all over the place and crowding each other out. And so right plant, right place is the biggest thing. So, you know, making a plan for what you want to plant, making sure they're good companions, that they all grow together well, and that they all support each other is the first thing. The second thing is, and they will then eventually kind of merge out and form their own weed suppressant mat if you plant them right. The other thing is, I think our perspective in a way needs to change a little bit on maintenance. Sometimes a little bit of wild is okay, you know, and I think a lot of people have embraced that over this, you know, over the past few years, definitely. You know, gardens have become more embracing of the wild and bringing nature back in, and, you know, leaving a small patch of wildflower lawn, or not being too perfect, leaving seed heads up, all of those things where we're striving for perfection and striving for nature to control nature, they're actually often the things that are best for nature. So you know, going, okay, I'm going to leave that dandelion just a little bit longer because the bees still need it, or, you know, mowing that a little bit later in the year, or all of those kind of things. It's our perspective, our mindset on the messy garden, I suppose, is something that we should check ourselves with every now and then and go, no, actually, we're doing good.
But I think
a little wild.
But no, you're right. I think this time has taught us that there is no perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nothing is perfect.
Absolutely.
And life is always changing. So, you know, that's a really good lesson, I think. And even walking here on the pavements, I've noticed all these wild daisies popping up. And they're just so beautiful, and you never see them. Normally they're sprayed, they're all gone, you know. So just,
well, that's what we need right now, isn't it? Like to see a daisy and to go, wow, and we're slowing down and appreciating things a little bit more, and like actually looking at the daisy instead of running to work and going, oh, more weeds. You know, it's like, actually, they're so pretty. I have never appreciated hawthorn flowers as much as I have this year. Just looking at them close up and going, wow, look at them, they're amazing.
No, it's really beautiful. It reminds me of, there was a guy in London a couple of years back, and he just took over a derelict plot and grew all what were termed weeds, and it was the most beautiful thing, you know. So it's incredible, really incredible. There's just a question there, Leonie, that came up. Where's a good resource for finding what plants work together? So what are good companions?
Good question. So, I mean, books is always a fantastic, you know, getting good companion books. The RHS books are fantastic. I've got a huge library of them at home. There's little kind of volumes, larger volumes. So I'd always recommend I love books anyway, because I love looking through them and putting notes in them. There's a good few online kind of nurseries and stuff that you can do research. Crocus UK is one that has quite a good bit of advice for that sort of thing. But I always go back to books personally.
Yes, well, you reference textbooks. Now that's great. Okay, brilliant. And then you mentioned, we talked about the wildlife. What are good plants to include in your garden to attract the wildlife in? So things like bees and...
Yeah, so loads. I mean, there's very kind of, you know, the ones that you start with, like honeysuckle and lavender and all of the kind of ones that biodiversity really enjoy. The first thing that I'd say to consider is to think about the seasons, to make sure there's something there throughout all the seasons. So to have berries, have seed heads, you know, to make sure that there's something for wildlife to enjoy, and a variety of wildlife as well. So all the herbs are great, oregano and thyme and lavender, and you know, the other thing as well is the flowers that have single blossoms are easier for bees to get into. So if you see a lot of kind of double or filled flowers, bees find it quite hard to get into them. So, you know, to consider the flower shape as well.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, because some of the roses are more open, whereas others are more, they'll be hard. Okay, that's great. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and a lot of the natives, obviously, as well. You know, this time of the year, you see the hawthorns and, you know, the trees, the crab apples, which, you know, orchard trees, apples, pears, all of that kind of thing. So, you know, including flowering trees in the garden is a big thing.
Beautiful. Okay, really lovely. And then one of the questions we had come in over the last couple of days was a lady who has literally just dug out a 15-meter bed, and she said she doesn't have a clue what to plant in it and wants low maintenance shrubs. So what would be your advice?
Okay. Well, the first thing I do is, I don't know, is it a shaded border? Is it a sunny border? You know, what's the soil like? So that's the first thing I'd say for her to start with, is assessing the plot, seeing, right, where is your sun coming from? How much sun does it get? And it's a good time to do that right now, is to assess, you know, throughout the day, how much sun does it get? And have a look at the soil. Look at what you can plant. Is it a very mossy area? If it's shaded, it might have a lot of moisture in it. You might have to improve the soil. Or if it's a really sunny border, you could, you know, have a kind of a gravelly border with Mediterranean plants. So it sort of depends, first of all, on what the conditions are before you can look at that. So getting that right, then you can start Googling, right, okay, let's have a look at a shaded border. If it's a really shaded border, she could start with something like hellebores and ferns, and then add things around that. Or, you know, because you can get evergreen ferns and they'd be quite low maintenance. You could have buxus bulls, you could have hellebores are quite low maintenance because they're evergreen and they're gorgeous in, you know, January, February, that sort of thing. So that's the first thing, is making sure she knows exactly what will grow there. So shade, you know, is there wind? Is it very dry, or is it very, very moisture retentive soil? So having a look at that.
Brilliant. Okay, now lovely. Well, it sounds like a lovely project anyway to be tackling over the wire. Yeah, lovely. Great. And then actually another question, interesting, somebody growing lettuce for the first time. And they're saying that the shoots are now 2 centimeters above the soil, all very crowded together. When should they start picking them out and planting them on?
So they need to be strong enough. The roots need to be strong enough to plant them on. So, but once the plant is kind of slightly, you know, hardening up a little bit, then you can kind of pull them out and plant them on. The way I plant them is I'd make sure the soil is really soft underneath, drop them in. Don't compress it because it will damage the roots. So just kind of softly put it down. And when you water it, then it'll kind of softly settle anyway, you know. And mind the slugs, because mine have been decimated by slugs. So the other day I brought out all this old copper I had that I collected in my shed from ages ago that I got in France. And apparently copper helps slugs, and it's working, because there was, I think there was about 5 lettuce heads, and it was just, they were just crazy destroyed by the slugs at nighttime in the glass house. So I just put loads of copper pots all over the place. I just put them up upside down, and apparently it keeps them away. Yeah, so it's worked.
That's fantastic. Well, that's a wonderful tip. Great, because I had beautiful lupins, but I think the slugs have completely just destroyed them. They really do. They really do.
And I've tried copper coins, but the copper coins don't seem to work as well. I don't know, is there something else in the mix, or
possibly?
I don't think they're pure copper. Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, that's a terrific tip. Brilliant. So then we had loads and loads of questions about people looking at planning patios, so planning more spaces. And I guess, and it's something that we get an awful lot, you know, the type of materials to use. I mean, sometimes what we do, especially where we're trying to connect inside and outside, you can get different kind of tiles, so that they sort of match the interior tiles, but they're textured. Or granite. So are there any good finishes that you would recommend just for our climate? Anything you would advise people steer clear of? Those kind of tips.
Well, obviously the first thing, like what you're saying, is look at what's going on inside, especially if you have you know, large windows or doors, and you have that inside-outside connection. So absolutely, first step is look at what's happening inside, see if there is a way of replicating that in an outdoor version. So obviously normal indoor tiles often don't work outside. So I'd be very careful about that for slip-proof reasons, etc. But if you can get it, for example, if you have a Kilkenny stone inside, you could get the different outdoor finish version of it outside. And then you've got that seamless flow from inside to outside, which is something that I adore. I think it's so lovely because you do feel like you're part of your garden then, you know, even if you're inside.
Yes, yeah.
So try and, you know, have a look at what's happening inside and try and bring that out. And that's why it's good to start thinking about things early, so that, you know, even before you start doing the finishes inside, you can think about how am I going to bring this outside? How can I, you know, bring the two together? Stone is always a fantastic material, especially if it's native stone. It feels like it belongs. So another tip is looking at what's actually native to your area. So in a lot of instances, you're kind of looking at, in so many sites that I go to, people have found rocks and stones in their space or underground, and they've dug things up. And you can take cues from what's in your garden and see, right, is there somebody local doing stone that would be suitable, that is of the same type? So then you're kind of taking a cue from your location and keeping things local and making it kind of blend in more. So taking inspiration from that, even if you were to choose a concrete stone, or, and that's why your concept is so important for your garden as well, the feel of your garden, what you want to achieve, and making that plan early on, because then if you're bringing the material in, it needs to follow that concept and follow the feel of your garden, and then you can't make mistakes because it all fits together like a nice puzzle.
Lovely. Yeah, and actually that raises another question we got, which was, how early should you start engaging with a garden designer? So if you are planning, any kind of refurbishment work that would connect with the garden, what stage is the best stage to start talking to somebody like yourself?
As early as possible, I would think. So it depends. If you're building a house yourself, I think it would be great to get an initial impression even before you start, to get a feel for the site. Then, as you're building, and you're making decisions, it's good to have that conversation happening, so that you know what to look for as you're building, and you know what to look out for and the mistakes to avoid. I think if you're looking for a connection between the inside and the outside, if you're making decisions as you go, that's a really good, way of doing it. You're also, as you're building, getting to know your site more. So once you then start living in it and start experiencing, where did the sun come from? Where do I want to sit? So having the discussions early on and then making decisions as you go is a really good way of doing that, because you're kind of learning your site in a way as you're there as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, for sure. And, even like what we've done in the past is we will take cues from the garden into the interior, but I suppose it works the same way for you too, for taking cues from the interior and bringing them out into the garden. So just reinforcing that connection and that flow, because, it's amazing. We've worked on homes where they might have just the tiniest of courtyard garden, but when you treat it as an extension of the house, as an extension of the living space, it's incredible. It creates the illusion of more space inside, but the same outside as well. So it's such an amazing transformation just to consider both at the same time. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think so many people are living with smaller spaces. I mean, I love designing small spaces. Just that, it's doable. Like sometimes people say, oh, I have a field to work with. And that takes longer to kind of start exploring the spaces, and you have to subdivide, and it's a more complicated process. While you have, if you have this kind of courtyard or small space, it's also condensed, and it has such a huge impact immediately, so it's really transformative. You're right.
No, fabulous. Great. And then any finishes people steer clear of? Like, there's one, decking for me is, just not great in this climate. And I know from going to see houses, I put my foot through so many deckings that, and and it's very expensive finish, so, and it's hard. It's really hard to maintain and to keep just with our climate. Now, there are alternatives though, aren't there? There's like
there's the composite decking, exactly. Yeah. Like there are people that do want real timber, but what I would say is try and keep them in spaces that have some sort of a pergola with glass, or somewhere that where you do have a cover, because it is very labor intensive. You have to constantly be staining and sanding and God knows what, and it does get very, very slippy in our climate as well. I mean, here in the Northwest, mossy.
Yes. Yeah. No. And it is really important just not to forget about the practicalities. Like, we're all about that with, when we're designing our interiors. Just if you don't think of the practicalities, it sort of undoes all that fantastic design work that you've done. So really,
you can have the most beautiful garden, but if you're falling or slipping or not enjoying it because it's just too intensive, then it's useless in a way, because it's not bringing you that feeling of joy and that's the whole reason why you should design a garden, or you should create that space of beauty around yourself, because you're having those moments of joy when you look out and you go, oh, that's so relaxing and so beautiful, and it makes you feel happy and lifted, and you don't want the opposite of that. You don't want to be looking at going, oh, not again, I have to do all the maintenance and all of that. So
exactly. And power hosing, decking and things like that. No, really important. No, that's fantastic. And then another question that we got actually was another planting question. Somebody's saying that during the growing season, they're feeding everything in their garden with tomato feed every week. Are they doing the right thing? Is there a different way they should be doing it?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, I don't know what they have growing in their garden. Tomato feed can be used for an awful lot of stuff, but there's also a lot of other things, that you can use. But it depends on what they're using. But tomato feed is good for most things.
Okay, and
I like
weekly
using
is a
seaweed,
good.
but I'm in the west of Ireland.
Yes.
Weekly at the moment for the growing season, yes, exactly.
Okay, so
And
doing the right thing.
each different thing will have the instructions on the back. So I think tomato feed would be weekly, and particularly vegetables, definitely weekly at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, fabulous. And another question we got, so tips for making small gardens look and feel bigger. So we've kind of touched on that in terms of, connecting the interior with the exterior, but any other sort of tips, like mirrors I've seen can work really well. Are there any other things you've done, Leonie, that kind of enhance the feeling of space?
Mirrors can work well, but they're also a little bit tricky at times because you'll have rain falling on them, you're cleaning them. So, use them carefully in particular places only. What I do love doing though is to make boundaries disappear. So your connection to, the views beyond are kind of limited, because if there's a wall or a fence, you're going, right, that's where my garden ends. But if you make those boundaries disappear, suddenly you're inviting in whatever is around you, whether it's other people's trees or, views beyond to God knows where, whatever views you might be able to pull in. So a great way of making, either fences or walls disappear is to paint it a dark color. So you've got like dark kind of rich moss greens or blacks or dark timber or a kind of mossy or kind of brown, soily browns. And that sort of makes them feel like they've disappeared. And then you can plant in front of that. And then it feels like you're sort of in a jungle. You're gorgeous. Just taking away those boundaries. And a lot of the time people just put up those boundaries to define the garden. And that becomes the biggest feature in the garden. And by making them disappear, suddenly you've got this clean nothing palette to work with. And it shows off your plants and pulls in everybody else's plants too. So, that flowering plum tree or cherry tree in somebody else's garden is suddenly yours. So great.
Yeah. Then that's a fabulous tip. And it's interesting, we discussed this a couple of weeks back when we were talking about paint, but just the use of those dark colors are so powerful. And you're right, they just set off the plants then. Suddenly the plants just come to life. It's beautiful. That's great.
And I had a client recently actually in Dublin who did that, and she painted them green. And suddenly it was like she had this huge garden. It just felt like a completely different space, because she did take in all those views beyond. And it was crazy. It was like it made it 3 times bigger, appear 3 times bigger.
Yeah. No, it's great tip. Wonderful. There's another question there. Recently moved into a new home. Is it too late in the year to start planting, or is it better to wait until early spring?
Absolutely not. So it depends what you're planting. Autumn is a fantastic time to plant because you can plant any time of the year, really. I wouldn't, obviously frost wise, etc. not. Autumn is the best time because the plants start rooting. So they're going into root rather than flower. So that's the ideal time, and you're getting your bulbs in, you're doing all of that. So autumn, before any kind of cold frost or that sort of thing, perennials particularly. And then spring is great too, but they will be forming flowers. So personally, the best time I would think would be to get them in autumn. So it's a great time to start planning now for that, to start thinking, okay, what do I want to get in? Start collecting the plants you want. And then just as the summer becomes less hot, because you don't want the plants to get too stressed, they finish flowering, that's when you can get them in.
Okay, amazing. Brilliant. And then another question. We have a really very traditional small garden and would love to turn it into an oasis. Sounds fabulous. So it comes down to choice of plants, does it? Or again, like the lovely idea you were saying, that nearly cocooning it in a really dark color and then layering up their plants would be fab.
Yeah, I suppose an oasis sort of gives you that feeling of lush, internalized, really green and rich. So if that's the concept and theme, I'd probably think, get loads of lush plants and then have some form of feature like oasis, running water, trickling water, or something that, draws you to a central space. So maybe you're sitting around a patio that has a water fountain that's, really quiet, but really gentle. You can have like rustling plants, like eucalyptus trees and ferns that rustle in the breeze. And maybe for an oasis, go a bit supersized. So have, large ferns and fronds and, big leafed evergreen plants and things like that. So really lush and green all around you. It'd be gorgeous.
Wow, it sounds amazing. Amazing. Beautiful. And another lovely question actually from Cora. I've a tiny back patio area that's very shady. I love the idea of big plants in a small area like a giant fern. Am I wrong?
No,
I would say, yeah, it sounds
ferns
amazing.
are perfect for shaded corners. So,
Yeah.
and there's huge amount of different varieties from, really shiny evergreen ones to really big frothy ones. And then the tree ferns too. The tree ferns are brilliant in a kind of a courtyard or small garden situation because they do need a little bit of protection.
Okay, yeah.
So just to keep an eye on that. But that would be fantastic. And you can have little, ground covering, European ginger or something like that, and make it a really rich, leafy, large leaf. Because it's easy to achieve that kind of jungle-like feel with ferns and large, hostas and, rich green plants. So you could combine that and make it a really kind of rich forest feel garden.
Amazing. And it's such a lovely project to take on because it's something you can just let evolve over time and you just get
Absolutely.
to enjoy it then, which is lovely. With the giant ferns, Leonie, is there anything you need to do in wintertime to protect them? Because I remember in that really bad snow, a lot of people lost them. So
Yeah.
any
So
tips for that if people were...
you can wrap them up in winter, definitely. And they do need that, particularly if it's in a place where it's where you have winds coming in. So that is vital to do if you're not in a very, very sheltered situation. I mean, down in Kerry, it's a completely different story to say the west of Ireland or Dublin. But I would recommend keeping a very, very close eye on them.
Okay. And when you say wrap them up, what do you mean? What would you wrap them in?
So any kind of a insulating material. So there's, you can get them in all the garden centres, the Hessian type. Sorry, I'm just going to plug you in because my battery's low. Give me 2 seconds.
Oh, sugar. Okay, go for it. Yes. Yeah. Because I've seen people use hay, Leonie, as well.
Yeah, you can do that, but the tree ferns do grow quite tall. So, you want to keep... Sorry. Sorry.
It's okay. That's okay. Take your time.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That should do it.
Fantastic. Great.
Yeah, so the tree ferns would grow quite tall, so you need to have something to wrap around the top of them. So if it's hay, you can put it around the base, but not the top of it.
Not the top, I understand. Okay, fantastic, brilliant. And then one final question we got is somebody's planning a a house renovation, but they don't have enough budget to do the whole lot altogether to include the garden. Should they still go ahead and plan and work with the garden designer just to plan that garden so they know what they're doing?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is making a plan. And if you have that plan, you can do things in stages. So with a lot of people, I would work on creating that plan and the dream for it. And even if you can just afford a little part of it, or even if you can't afford any of it now, having that plan in place and knowing where you're going means you can either take on things yourself, means you can start looking at plants and making that plan, making whatever you can afford and doing those things over time. So I think having a clear vision of where you're going is one of the biggest things, because it makes it feel achievable and it makes it feel doable rather than going, oh, where do I start? And we'll put it off for another 10 years. And, so knowing where you're going with it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the same with home design. We, especially now with so much uncertainty, we have a lot of people who are planning big jobs, but now they're looking at well, maybe we'll do part of it, but at least we're saying to them the same thing. Yeah. Plan for the whole lot, and then you understand how to do it without having to undo a load of stuff when you go to do the rest of it. So planning for the garden, it means it's all done together and you're not ripping something out to start all over again, which is so wasteful. So no, that's great advice. Brilliant. And then any final tips from you if anybody's out there now this weekend battling the wind or over the next while?
Start dreaming. I think now is the time to really start thinking about what you want from your space and how you want it to make you feel, what it can give you. So start dreaming about how to make it give you more over the next while, and how you can use it to connect with nature and get out there to kind of gain strength. And I think we've all felt that over the past while, is how much we need our green spaces and how important they are. how much we should appreciate them, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
this
you.
morning. It's such a lovely topic, and honestly, we could talk and talk and talk about it, but loved all of
Yeah.
that advice, and hopefully everybody took something away from that and can enjoy their gardens over the next while. So thanks,
Thank you so
Leonie.
much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, bye bye now.
Bye.